I want to piggyback on what you just said. And I'm looking at these questions that are popping up in the chat. And already we have two questions about the importance of major or particular content courses. And that's interesting because I have to say, as an educator, I have so many students who increasingly think that a major equals job. And that's not at all what I see when I keep in touch with alums. And so also, I noticed as you were talking about your own journey and experiences, and then what characteristics would make someone a diplomat. It wasn't content specific. It was more personality and values and skill sets, right?
You got it exactly. I'm telling you guys, study whatever you want. Do well, because you will have to provide transcripts. So there's no point in slogging through something because it's something and you don't love it, and then you get a B- or a C+. And I got really great grades as a graduate student because I studied exactly what I wanted, and I will deny my transcripts as an undergraduate because they weren't very good. Study what you want. Your ability, as I said, you need to know about American history, American policy and politics, and diplomatic history. And that, as you prepare for the Foreign Service exam, what I did was read Time magazine. Once I didn't pass it the first time, for that next year, I read Time magazine and Newsweek every week because they were short, they were crisp articles, but they also provided background so that I could do some more research to understand why, Serbia and Kosovo were fighting with each other, or why, Montenegro and Northern Montenegro and Greece, and they're all fighting about the name. Like, what? Montenegro, why? But that's the sort of thing. So they're fighting, and that's going to be in Time or Newsweek, or even better, if you've got the time and the money, The Economist really does a great job of giving you the background into today's issues. It's by far the best, but it's an expensive magazine. Find it in the library, and it takes time to get through it. That background is going to help you answer questions about, but you've got to know about art. You've got to know about music. You are representing the United States. The expectation is you are well informed about US culture, history, politics, etc. So that's the part you've got to get. But you don't have to study that. Some people do, but you don't have to. Then it's the English language that kills most people. And I don't care what you study. If you can't put your sentences together well, if you're sloppy with your verbs and your pronouns, you're not going to pass. I don't care what you know. Even if you go and get a business degree, you can use that business degree as an economic officer, or you can go work for the Foreign Commercial Service. So the content should please you. Just do well at it. But are you flexible? Are you a quick study? Do you communicate well? Do you like people? Most good diplomats are extroverts, but we also have, and I'd say it's 55% extrovert, 45% introvert. And I always found it astonishing that introverts would be diplomats because it's so much people work. But I had a colleague tell me the difference, and I think it's a good one, between an introvert and an extrovert. And the introvert can do the same work, hit the dinner party, hit the circuit of national days, do the meetings, give the speeches, the same way an extrovert can. But I recharge my cells with this sort of thing, with interaction with people, which is why the pandemic is so frustrating to me, because I'm going to be more energetic at the end of the session than I was when I started it, quite frankly, because that ability to engage, to have conversation. I'm sorry that you're there because I can't, engage you and hear your voices, but that kind of engagement, that just jazzes me. I'm ready to go, and I can do it all day and half the night. An introvert has to be alone. This is my husband's chair, but this is my Zoom corner now, reading a book. An introvert recharges his or her batteries alone. Mm-hmm. And with that understanding of the difference, you can do the work, but how do you recharge yourself? You'll know if you're an introvert or an extrovert. My husband's an introvert. He's like loving this pandemic. He's fine with it. So find what you love. Make sure you're flexible, that you don't get flummoxed easily. Stuff changes. There's a pig that's sharing the plane with you, you know, or someone's offering you a bribe, or something terrible happens, and you've got to keep yourself together. Because while that attack was going on, I had to find out where all of my people were. We were trying to take a roll call of everyone. And one of my staff was out in the maintenance shed. She'd been coming through the gate, and the terrorists came in right behind her, and they shot up her car. It was an armored car, but if you fire at the same point, the bullets will go through. They shot through her car. They hit the driver. He was bleeding. They missed her, and they kept coming into the consulate. So she got the driver and pulled him to the side of the car as best she could, bound his wound as best she could, and then made a dash to the nearest building. Inside that building were our maintenance crew, and they put her in a bin where they kept supplies, and they were standing in that building with their hammers and saws ready to defend her. I mean, those guys were unbelievable. And she had her phone with her, and I was talking to her on the phone, and I was telling her to be still, to keep quiet. And I said to her, Monica, this is not your day to die. Hold. But bullets were flying all around, and we thought they were going to get into the consulate, and we were trying to figure out where to get people to keep them as safe as possible. I did not have the time or the space to be frightened for myself. It was not about me. It was about everybody who was under my responsibility as chief of mission. So big things like that are going to happen too. But a lot of funny things happen along the way, and you've just got to be able to keep your calm and pivot and pivot. And that's what's going to make you good.
Mm-hmm. If you, as someone who has, you know, spent most of her waking hours working on relationships between the United States and other countries, many of them very different culturally, politically, and otherwise, very different. What is your hope? What do you think we need? What do we need in our diplomats? What's your hope for the United States diplomacy work?
Well, this has been a tough time, a very tough time for my colleagues. If you've read anything about me, the New York Times printed an article I wrote about why I left the State Department. This administration and this president does not value diplomacy, and we are suffering for it. We have lost our leadership positions on so many levels, whether it is global women's issues, where they didn't even fill the position for 2 years, and a leadership position on the education of women, because we have learned long ago that when you educate women, the whole family gets educated. It doesn't happen that way if you educate a man, but if you educate women, you raise the socioeconomic status of the entire family and therefore the entire nation. And we were not leading. We had a coordinator for counterterrorism, still there for cybersecurity. They did not fill the position. We are in negotiations at the United Nations without the key person, and we are losing our position on freedom of speech, on freedom of access to the internet, because countries like Russia, like China, want state control over it. Other countries are following their lead because we are not leading. Look at how we've lost our leadership position on human rights. And so all of these things that make the world a better place and frankly, a safer place for you and me, we have a lot of work to do to catch up, to reclaim our position and to rethink how we've done things in the past. Because I'm not kidding. I want to say it's the BBC, but there is an interactive map. You can find it online, and it's a visual of where the weapons are going, where they're made, and where they're going. And it is a frightening and frankly stomach-churning map, because you will see it in all the beautiful bright colors of all the weapons we send around the world that keep conflict going. The weapons mostly come from us. And I am hoping young people like you coming into the diplomatic corps, coming into government, can help change that. It's not a good place to be, in all honesty. It's not a good place to be. We need to change it, and we need you. So we need you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I teach a course on immigration, and I took students to meet a man in Columbus who immigrated from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And he shared his story with them. And he, after waiting for 11 years in a refugee camp in Uganda, finally was able to come to the United States, to Columbus, Ohio,
Wow.
and it was just months before the election in 2016.
Wow.
And if he and after that, after meeting with him and speaking with him, we met with the volunteer coordinator. It's called Community Refugee and Immigration Services. And this man's name was Tyler Reeve, who's the volunteer coordinator, and he just presented the numbers of asylum seekers before the Trump administration versus after, and it was just stunning.
Yeah. And we've taken even fewer than are seeking. And the reality is we have space. When you think about the countries that take the most refugees in the world, Turkey, Jordan, Pakistan, these are not wealthy countries, and yet they take refugees, and we do so much less. My God, we do so much less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So since there have been all of these changes in the State Department, do you see the State Department changing?
If you guys vote.
Yeah.
Vote.
Yes.
I will say this. If the president is returned, there are going to be another dark 4 years for diplomacy and international relations. Our ability to sway and lead also is based on our dependability and our outlook and interaction with other nations, which hasn't been that good in the last 4 years. If there is a change of administration, I am confident you are going to see a resurgence of the importance and respect for and recognition of the importance of diplomacy. And because the president has fulfilled so few positions, there are actings all over the place and gaps all over the place, there is going to be a lot of hiring going on. This is a time, even if you are a white male and concerned about your position in the world, you can be on the right side of history, because there's going to be room for you and there's going to be room for others. And so we can see, based on our international relations, that simply having one group be in the dominant position is not sufficient to us doing a good job or having great national security. More perspectives at the table are going to bring more options for resolution. Different perspectives allow access to different ways of thinking and interlocutors. As a woman, I was able to reach places in Saudi Arabia that my male colleagues could not go. They just couldn't go. The culture would not allow it. As a brown person, I can tell you that I've walked into rooms and surprised people as the American diplomat. And while they're kind of regrouping what they thought that U.S. diplomat was going to look like, I'm ready to go. I got this. So we take in everything we have, whether it's a hobby. You know, I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I've written 2 scientific papers on Star Trek, and, you know, running into people at Comic-Cons around the world and being able to talk about Star Trek, because Star Trek, people watch it around the world. I have found that an amazing entree to talk to people about diplomacy, about international relations, and how Star Trek visualizes the world, and how can we get to that ideal, based on which episode you're watching, that ideal. If you have music in your background, types of music or art or theater, one of the things I do around the world is I join choirs. I have sung in Egypt. I have sung in Malta. I've sung in countries all around the world, or done theater, because it's something that is shared around the world. Everything you bring it to the table, bring it as part of America. As part of America, it's going to help you make connections.
So it's both personal and national. And that's
Yes.
the beauty of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. So a history professor who's with us and who's the outgoing director of the Global Scholars Program, and he also is chair of the Latin American Studies. He asks, what do you recommend for the next Secretary of State?
To be changed, number one. The next Secretary of State, again, this one, the next Secretary of State is going to have to go around the world and reestablish relationships. You know, the particularly with our closest partners, which has always been Europe. A lot of fence mending is going to have to take place there. And this moment in America's life, as well as the rest of the world, as we've seen, the Black Lives Matter, the fact that we are more focused on the need for social justice. You know, American diplomats, myself included, we've gone around the world and criticized countries here, there, and everywhere about their human rights, about the state's treatment of civilians in the country. You know, are people getting access to a fair trial? Are they, you know, do you have to have money, or do you have to have position, or do you have to belong to a certain sect or tribe or whatever in a country to get access to justice? Ignoring the fact that we have these problems here at home. And I say ignoring, but largely ignoring, because you can't ignore it. And people who know a lot about the United States ask us about it. You know, there's a brilliant book, if you have the opportunity to read it. It's called In the Garden of the Beasts. And there's a public garden in Germany, the Tiergarten, and it's German for the Garden of the Beast. So it's a translation from the German. And it's basically pulled from the memoirs of the US ambassador who was in Germany from the early to the late 1930s, and talking about Germany's slide toward war and dictatorship, and of course, the treatment of Jews in Germany. And it wasn't till I read that book that I understood how damaging our natural inclination to speak up for minority rights in Europe at that time was damaged, was hampered and hindered by our own treatment of African Americans in this country. To wit, when the ambassador was writing home to the State Department and telling about how Jews were beginning to be prevented from entering certain professions, that they were losing their jobs, that they were confined to certain areas, et cetera, the United States stayed silent. And we stayed silent because the Germans were basing their restrictions on German Jews on what America was doing with Blacks. And I was so shocked when I read this. They based their treatment of German Jews on what America was doing with our own citizens. And we could not criticize them. How could we criticize them? And the discussions, and you can see in the book where State Department leaders were saying, we can't criticize them because of course he's going to mention Jim Crow laws, and what can we say? Or the fact that, you know, Kristallnacht, which, you know, I learned about in high school and of course in Israel, you know, about this night, this pogrom where they smashed up the Jewish areas of stores and shops and killed, you know, several hundred Jews that night. And they called it Kristallnacht because of all the broken glass, because of the destruction of that area. And yet many of you, I'm certain, did not know about this pogrom in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood, Oklahoma, where the Black Wall Street was destroyed and hundreds of African Americans killed and their businesses destroyed. And the US government never spoke about it, and the rest of the world didn't know about it, and Americans didn't know about it. We just kept silent, and nobody knew that it happened except for those who were there, lost their lives, lost family, lost businesses, and had to go other places. And so that happened in the 1920s, 10 years before Kristallnacht happened in Germany. Yeah. So
stunning. That's really stunning. Yeah. We have two more questions. So I'm going to start with Alexis Lewis, who's a freshman global scholar, and she writes, how do you balance your personal interests, passions, etc., that may not have anything to do with your job as a diplomat with the standards and images you must hold yourself to constantly while doing such a job? Did you ever have any social blunders?
Of course. Of course. Although State Department does a good job of training, so you can take protocol lessons, absolutely. And I was a protocol officer at the embassy in Jakarta, and they gave me a big thick book, so I had to read it, bone up. So you will get information before you go. They just don't send you off to the wolves. Mistakes can and will be made, but there is someone, our local staff at the embassy is there to guide you. So if you're going to, a state dinner or something, an official function, before I went to present my credentials in Malta, I decided to do it in Maltese because I'm good at languages and I knew I could do it. So I knew what I wanted to say and worked with a tutor to be able to say it in Maltese. They sent me the information about what I needed to wear. I had to wear a hat, and I had to have, they said if you have a purse, if you see pictures of the Queen and she's got her little handbag over her right arm, well, I was instructed to do the same thing. No clutch purses. It had to be, if I was bringing one, so I didn't bring one because, I wasn't trying to look like the Queen. But there are people who will guide you. So that part is there. And then, human relations are human relations. You'll make mistakes, sometimes in the furtherance of your duties and sometimes in a personal nature. I remember going to a dinner, and this was the first dinner where it was fully set, 5 forks and 5 knives on the other side. It was one of those tables that will freeze the heart if you are not prepared for it. But luckily I knew you start from the outside and work your way in. Then it becomes easy. So you'll make mistakes. It's okay. I mean, there are going to be lots of mistakes made in life anyway. Don't let that overset you. Sometimes it's sartorial. You might not have the right thing on, so you'll wear the right thing the next time. The thing I think is most important is that you approach your interactions with other people with grace, with humility, and with respect. And if you go with those three things uppermost in your mind and heart, you'll be fine.
Those are universal languages, aren't they?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we have a really good question to end on too, which is, this is from Elliot Spice, also a freshman global scholar. He writes, do you personally have any next step in terms of diplomacy?
I do. It is, I learned from my own experiences, and I believe that the United States is ready to do a better job of bringing diverse voices to the table. We need first generation Americans, new Americans. I have been overseas where, because I was the brown woman, I was able to make a connection with who was on the other side of the table. Because I had whatever it was, as I said, Star Trek's been really helpful, but whatever it was I had, but I have seen that everything that each of us bring can help. And we are looking at, Capitol Hill is looking at legislation to help the State Department do a better job, not only of bringing in diverse voices, but of retaining them. Because right now we do a terrible job. The Government Accountability Office did a report in March that showed just how few women and how few underrepresented Americans are at the senior levels of the Department of State. So I do some volunteer work, I won't say more, on this issue for the federal government writ large, but certainly for the State Department and our diplomatic corps, to ensure that each of us will have a real opportunity to reach our full potential. And I think it's going to be better for America if we can. And so I'm working on this now. I may continue to work in an unofficial capacity. I don't know what the future may bring. I can't imagine leaving lovely Cleveland because I like it here so much. But we'll see. We'll see. And what I'm spending most of my time doing is running after people like you, sir. People like all of you, because you are our next generation. You are hope. For the fourth time, you are needed. There are now opportunities for you really to come in and fulfill your potential. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I have eaten food and partied around the world. I have met people on trains and on planes and walking. In Malta, I picked a different part of the country every morning to take a walk and meet people and make friends for America. That is the job. And it's a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You've helped us imagine and dream and focus and think. And I, for one, I feel very inspired and hopeful.
Yeah. Yeah. We have linguists too.
That's right.
Everybody, languages, our institute, and we have people overseas who set up our language programs. I'm telling you, whatever you like to do, you can do it there. I'm going to, if you don't have my email address, if people have other questions or want to follow up, please give them my contact information. I am about recruiting. I want you all.
So
I want you all.
I have your assistant's email. I don't have yours. Would you like to give it, or should I reach out to him?
Reach out to Josh and then he'll connect us all. Perfect.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
My privilege. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Ciao.